Have you ever wondered how a simple encounter can change the course of your life? That Christmas Eve, as I waited tables in a busy restaurant, I had no idea that I was about to cross paths with someone who would transform my reality in unimaginable ways. The atmosphere was full of joy, but also challenges. The biting cold of the night and the pressure to serve all the customers quickly made the environment hostile. However, I couldn't afford to let that get me down. My dream of a better future depended on every tip and every smile I managed to get from customers. My name is Emily, a waitress who has always struggled to survive. Every day, I strive to do my best, dreaming of one day opening my own cafe, a welcoming place where people could feel at home. The smell of fresh coffee and the sound of frothing milk were like music to me, a symphony that echoed in my deepest dreams. However, the reality was harsh. He worked long hours, often without rest, and barely made ends meet. The pressure was constant, and the weight of my dreams felt heavier every day. That night, while waiting on a table, I noticed a man sitting alone, looking out the window. He seemed out of place among the hustle and bustle around me. As I approached, his eyes lit up, and our conversation flowed unexpectedly. He introduced himself as David, a successful businessman who had recently moved to the city. We talk about life, dreams, and challenges. He was kind and caring, and I felt at ease around him. The connection we felt was palpable, as if time had stopped. When the night came to an end, David left a generous tip and a note with his phone number. "If you need help, don't hesitate to call me," he wrote. I was stunned, not knowing if it was real. Deep down, a voice inside me questioned whether I deserved all that affection and attention. Insecurity followed me, like a persistent shadow, but something about that gesture made me believe that maybe, just maybe, things could change. The next day, when I woke up, I found a luxury car parked in front of my house. It was the same car that David had mentioned during our conversation. My heart raced. What did this mean? Had he really cared? The world seemed to spin around me as I tried to process the reality of the situation. What did I really want? Was it possible that what I wanted most was about to happen? With the car in front of me, I realized that it was not just a symbol of wealth, but an opportunity. A chance to change my life and finally make my dream come true. But what was I willing to sacrifice for this? Doubt consumed me, and I knew I couldn't make this decision alone. Throughout the day, I interacted with other characters that were part of my life, like my coworker, Sarah, who always encouraged me to move forward and never give up on my dreams. She was the voice of reason, always reminding me of the importance of believing in myself. My mind was full of questions. Could I trust David? Was he really who he said he was? For me, every step into the unknown was terrifying but also exciting. The memories of my past, the failures I had faced, all of this mixed with the hope that was beginning to well up within me. It was a constant struggle between the fear of failing again and the willingness to risk everything for a better future. The day passed, and as I pondered the possibilities, I realized that the lessons I had learned throughout my life were more valuable than I had imagined. The importance of perseverance, empathy, and courage. I finally began to understand that, even when faced with challenges, there was always a way forward. With this in mind, I decided it was time to face my fears and move forward, even if the future was uncertain. And so, with my heart racing and my mind buzzing with ideas, I prepared to take the next step. Life was about to change, and I was ready to find out where this new journey would take me. After all, sometimes all we need is a little push and a little courage to make our dreams come true. The following hours were a whirlwind of emotions. After leaving David's car parked in front of my house, my mind kept thinking about the possibilities that this situation could bring. I was torn between the excitement of a new opportunity and the fear of getting carried away by something that might not be real. At work, the frenetic pace of the next night at the restaurant didn't give me much time to think, but conversations with my coworkers brought me some relief. Sarah, my closest colleague, always full of energy and with a contagious smile, noticed that something was different with me. "Hey, Emily, you seem distant." "Did something happen?" she asked as she cleaned a nearby table. I decided to open my heart. "I met this guy on Christmas Eve. He's different. He introduced himself as a businessman and left me his number. I don't know if I should call. Sarah stopped what she was doing and looked at me with a curious look. Different how? Is he rich? Handsome? What does he want with you? I laughed nervously. He's handsome, yes, but that's not all. He seems genuine. We had a real conversation, you know? He listened to me. That's rare. Emily, this is amazing. You should call him. Who knows? Maybe he can help you realize your dream of opening the cafe, she said excitedly. But at the same time, I noticed a shadow of doubt in his eyes. Just be careful, okay? It's easy to get carried away by promises of success. This made me hesitate. What Sarah was saying was true. I had seen many people lose themselves in pursuit of wealth and fame, forgetting where they came from. I myself had felt this way on a few occasions. Often, in the heat of the moment, I let my ambitions speak louder than my common sense. As I continued to wait tables, I visualized the scene that could happen if I actually called David. What did he expect from me? Did he really care, or was he just reveling in the idea of helping a dreamy waitress? Insecurity enveloped me like a heavy blanket. The voices of doubt echoed in my mind, and I wondered if I was ready to open my heart again. That same night, another colleague, Jake, a more skeptical guy, approached me. He was known for being practical and to the point. Emily, are you thinking about calling that businessman? Don't forget who you are. He might be interested in you because you're different from the women he usually meets. That observation cut me off. I didn't want to be just a curiosity or a charity project. I don't know, Jake. It's complicated. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail again? Jake crossed his arms, reflecting. Everyone is afraid of failing, Emily. But you have to ask yourself, what do you want? That's what will determine your success. Don't let other people's opinions define who you are. These words resonated within me. I was stuck between the desire to change my life and the fear of failing again. What if I took a risk and everything went wrong? What if I got hurt? Life was full of uncertainty, and I had learned that the hard way. At the end of the night, I returned home with a head full of thoughts. The conversations I had left me in a state of deep reflection. I remembered the lessons my mother always told me about moving forward, even when life gets hard. Life is not easy, but you have to fight for what you want, she often repeated. But the struggle was not just external. I also struggled internally. Looking in the mirror, I realized that insecurities were rooted in me. There was a fear of getting carried away by a dream and then realizing it wasn't real. What did I really want? A coffee, yes, but I also wanted to be recognized for who I was, not just for an opportunity that came out of nowhere. I decided I needed more time to think. The idea of looking for David made me nervous, but also excited. The possibility of a new beginning was tempting. However, I didn't want it to become a dependency. I needed to find a balance between pursuing my dream and maintaining my autonomy. That week, while waiting tables, I observed customers with a new perspective. Each person had a story, a dream, and I wondered if they also faced doubts and uncertainties. The restaurant was always full, but I still felt alone in that crowd. One night, while talking to a group of clients, I heard one of them comment on the difficulties of opening a business. He was an older man who seemed to have had many experiences. He said, "Nothing is more worthwhile than a dream that you strive to achieve. But be aware that the journey can be full of ups and downs." These words touched me deeply. This was exactly what I was facing. The struggle between hope and fear, between the desire for success and the bonds I had with my friends and my current life. I was at a turning point, but I still didn't know which path to choose. With all these reflections, I realized I was ready to take a step. But it would be a careful, considered step, not a headlong rush into the unknown. I needed to be true to myself without letting the pursuit of success overshadow the authenticity I had always valued. And so, with my mind calmer and my heart still racing, I began to prepare myself for what was to come. I called David, but not before remembering the lessons I had learned. I was ready to face whatever came my way, armed with the knowledge that, regardless of the outcome, I was more than just a waitress. I was a woman with dreams, determination, and the strength to fight for them. After a few days of intense reflection, I finally decided it was time to call David. The phone vibrated in my palm, and my heart sank as the number lit up on the screen. What would I say? What would he say? Every second felt like an eternity, and the uncertainty left me paralyzed. Before I could change my mind, I pressed the call button. David's voice on the other end of the line was as smooth and engaging as I remembered. "Emily, so good to hear from you," he exclaimed. The conversation flowed naturally, and soon we were laughing and remembering our conversation on Christmas Eve. He invited me for coffee, and I accepted, even though part of me was terrified. On the day of the meeting, I wore my best blouse, trying to hide my insecurity behind a confident smile. But as I got closer to the cafe where we agreed to meet, each step became heavier. What did I really want? Just having fun or really looking for something more? When I arrived, David was sitting at the table, looking excited. He seemed so at ease, so sure of himself. And me? I felt like a stranger in my own body. The conversation started lightly, but soon he started talking about his ambitions, about how he was investing in new projects, and about the opportunities that were emerging in his life. "You should take your chance, Emily. You have great potential." "A coffee would be a great deal," he said, encouraging me. To him, it seemed so simple, so easy. But what about the difficulties? The bills to pay, the fear of not being able to attract customers, the fear of failing? I was struggling to put all my fears into words. "I'd like to do that, but it's complicated." "It's not just opening a business, you know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The doubt was consuming me, and I didn't want him to see how hesitant I was. But David insisted. "Sometimes we need to take a step, even if it's small. You can't let fear paralyze you." He was right, but every time he talked about success, something inside me twitched. I didn't just want to be a success story, I wanted to be myself. The pressure was starting to suffocate me. In the days that followed, the conversation with David stayed in my mind. He seemed so confident, while I felt trapped in an internal battle. I started working more hours at the restaurant, trying to save every penny. The desire to open my coffee became a burning flame, but insecurity was an icy wind that blew towards me, trying to put out my fire. The pressure started to affect my friendship with Sarah. I noticed her worried, but I didn't know how to explain what she was going through. One night, while we were cleaning the restaurant, she confronted me. "Emily, you don't have to do this alone. I know you're trying hard, but I can't watch you destroy yourself like this." Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. "I'm not destroying myself, Sarah. I'm just trying to make my dream come true." Anger and frustration poured out of me, and I realized I was screaming. The coffee, the pressure, the insecurity, everything was piling up, and I didn't know how to deal with it. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw concern. "But at what cost, Emily? You're moving away from me, and it hurts me. You don't need to give up your personal life for the sake of a dream." This made me reflect. Was she really willing to sacrifice everything for this idea? I had to ask myself if I still had room for the people I loved in my life. What would happen to my dream if I lost the friendships I valued so much? In the days that followed, this reflection consumed me. I wanted the coffee so bad, but I didn't want to lose myself in the process. What was I really willing to sacrifice? What was I willing to give up? Over time, conversations with David began to become more frequent, but with each meeting, the pressure increased. He talked about investments, about how I could get financing, and I felt more and more like an imposter. One day, he made me a proposal that left me shocked. "We can invest together. I can help you get started." I felt like an iron ball had been thrown into my stomach. The idea of accepting help from someone I barely knew horrified me. What if I failed? What if he expected more from me than I could offer? Fear began to consume me again, and I wondered if I was prepared for this. That night, as I tried to sleep, doubts assailed me. I didn't want to be a charity. I didn't want to be a project. I wanted my coffee to be a reflection of who I was. But what was I, exactly? I was still discovering myself, and now I was about to take a chance on something that could change my life forever. Conversations with my colleagues at the restaurant also left me thoughtful. Jake, who had a more practical outlook on life, told me, "Emily, don't forget that dreams come with a price. And success isn't guaranteed. Often, the people you meet may not have the best intentions. His words echoed in my mind. What if David wasn't who he said he was? What if this was all just a game for him? Insecurity and distrust began to intertwine in my heart. I wanted to believe it, but the truth was that I was still fighting my own demons. The internal conflict began to wear me down and, at the same time, strengthen my resolve. Each day, I realized that I needed to make a decision, one that would not only affect my professional life, but that could also change the course of my personal relationships. I was at a critical point, and even with David's pressure and Jake's doubts, the answer was still in me. I had to find a balance between what I dreamed of and who I really was. And so, with my mind buzzing with thoughts, I realized that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but the journey of self-discovery could be the key to a future I truly wanted. The day of the meeting with David arrived. I was nervous, not just about meeting him, but because the proposal to invest together was on my mind. As I was getting ready, I looked in the mirror and tried to find the confidence I needed. The truth, however, was that my heart was conflicted. I was about to take a step that could change my life, but the uncertainty made me restless. When I arrived at the cafe, David was already there, with a smile that radiated enthusiasm. He was the personification of confidence, while I felt a bit like an imposter. The conversation started lightly, but soon he returned to the subject of our potential as business partners. Emily, think of everything we could achieve together. You have so much talent. I just want you to see that. His every word was like a breath of fresh air, but also a crushing weight. I wanted to believe I could do it, but the voices of doubt echoed in my mind. What if I failed? What if, by accepting his help, I stopped being myself? What would this mean for my coffee, for my identity? The pressure increased when he asked me directly, will you accept the proposal? I truly believe we can make it happen. I looked at him, and emotions started to take over me. Insecurity and fear began to turn into frustration. David, I don't know if I'm ready. What happens if it doesn't work? What happens if I'm not who you think I am? He looked at me with a soft, almost paternal expression. Emily, no one starts out knowing everything. Success is not a straight line. It's a series of ups and downs. You have to take the first step to find out where it can take you. His words reverberated through me, but the doubts still persisted. I didn't want to be a charity. I didn't want him to see me as someone who needed help. I wanted to be strong, independent. I began to feel pressure from all directions. David's expectation, Sarah's concern, Jake's warnings. It was like I was trapped in a maze, not knowing which way to go. That night, as I tried to sleep, anxiety consumed me. I spent hours tossing and turning in bed, thinking about my past. I remembered the mistakes I made, the opportunities one passed up out of fear. The thought of failing again made me panic. I was on the verge of an emotional breakdown, fighting the tide of emotions that threatened to engulf me. It was then that an idea crossed my mind. What if I decided not to let the pressure get me? What if, instead of worrying about what David or anyone else thought, I focused on what I really wanted? I didn't need a partner to validate my dreams. I started to remember small victories I had throughout my life. Every step I took, every dish I prepared in the restaurant, every smile from a satisfied customer reminded me that I was capable of achieving what I wanted. The next morning, I went to work with a new perspective. During the shift, I met Sarah and decided to open my heart. I'm so confused, Sarah. David is amazing and his proposal is tempting, but I don't want to lose who I am in the process. She listened to me attentively, and when I finished speaking, she smiled. Emily, you don't have to choose between your dream and your friendships. You can have both. And if David really cares about you, he'll understand. Her words resonated with me. I didn't need to sacrifice my essence to pursue what I wanted. From that moment on, I decided I would do everything on my terms. I wasn't going to let myself be carried away by external pressure, but rather allow myself to explore my dream in an authentic way. I wanted to open my cafe, but I wanted it to be a true reflection of who I am. With this new determination, I went to David and, with a mix of nervousness and confidence, said, David, I appreciate your offer and your support, but I want to do this alone. I need to figure out what I can accomplish on my own, without depending on anyone. His expression changed, but I didn't notice any anger or disappointment. He seemed more respectful. "I understand, Emily, and I respect your decision. I'll be here if you need me, but know that you already have everything you need inside of you." His words were a relief and, at the same time, a challenge. As we decided to go our separate ways, I realized I was beginning to understand what true success was. It wasn't about money or fame, it was about being true to myself, respecting myself, and moving at my own pace. I began to see that the true value was in building something that was mine, that reflected not only my ambitions, but also my passions and values. Over time, conversations with Sarah became more frequent and in-depth. We planned together what my cafe could be. With each idea we discussed, my enthusiasm grew. I was no longer alone on this journey. Instead of distancing myself from the people I loved, I included them, and that made me feel stronger. The journey would still be challenging, but as I reflected on what I learned, I realized that dreams are like seeds. They need time, care, and, above all, the freedom to grow in the way they want. And so, with a new understanding of myself and what success meant, I was ready to take the step I always wanted, but now with a lighter heart and a clearer mind. After the conversation with David, a wave of relief washed over me, but soon doubt set in again. I had made an important decision, but now the responsibility was all mine. As I headed home, the streets seemed wider, the air fresher, but inside me, a storm of emotions was brewing. I was alone on this journey, and it scared me. That night, I lay in bed, moonlight filtering through the window, and began to reflect on what I really wanted. The fear of failing accompanied me, but at the same time, there was a spark of hope. I remembered all the times I worked hard, the sleepless nights, and the love I put into every dish that came out of the kitchen. This passion was the basis of my dream, and I couldn't let it slip away. The next day, I went to the cafe and started to organize my thoughts. The kitchen was silent except for the sound of my racing heart. I grabbed some blank sheets of paper and started writing down my ideas. What did I want this coffee to represent? What were the flavors and experiences I wanted to offer? Every word I wrote seemed to give me more clarity. It was then that Sarah entered. She looked at me with a smile and without hesitation asked, "How are you feeling after your conversation with David?" The question was direct, but it left me speechless. I had hidden behind the idea of being strong, but the truth was that I was struggling. "Sarah, I'm scared. I don't know if I can do this alone." She sat down next to me and took out a sheet of paper. "Remember what you said about your small victories. Let's list everything you've accomplished. It may seem small, but every step counts." So we started. With each item we wrote, I felt lighter. I remembered the first customer who smiled with satisfaction, the time I created a special dish for an event and people applauded. Each memory was a powerful reminder of what I was capable of. As we spoke, I realized that Sarah wasn't just a friend. She was becoming a partner in my journey. The conversations became deeper, and sometimes I found myself sharing fears I had never expressed before. What if I can't attract customers? What if no one likes what I do? I questioned, the insecurities still present. Sarah took my hand and looked into my eyes. "Emily, you can't please everyone. And that's okay. What matters is that you do what you love. And people who truly appreciate your work will come." His words echoed in my mind, like a mantra I needed to hear. As the days went by, I noticed the changes in myself. Every time he walked into the kitchen, I felt more confident. I started testing new recipes, trying flavor combinations that I always wanted to try. The kitchen became a space of freedom where I could be myself without the weight of other people's expectations. The pressure that once paralyzed me has now turned into motivation. However, the journey was not without challenges. There were times when I felt overwhelmed, especially when the bills started piling up and the flow of clients wasn't as steady as I'd hoped. One afternoon, while cleaning tables, I received a text from Jake, my longtime friend. He asked how I was handling the coffee pressure. "You know, sometimes it feels like I'm swimming against the current," I replied honestly. Jake responded to me with a reflection that stuck with me. "Sometimes, Emily, the current is not an enemy. It can be part of the growth process." Life is not just about victories. His words resonated with me, reminding me that patience was needed and that the struggle was part of the journey. Over time, I learned to deal with pressure in a new way. Every time I felt low, I reminded myself of the small victories and lessons I was learning. I began to see difficulties as opportunities for growth. It wasn't easy, but the idea of moving forward and fighting for what I wanted began to take root in me. The relationship with David also evolved. He sent me messages of support every now and then, and I could tell that even though our journeys took different paths, there was a mutual respect. It gave me the confidence that even if we were no longer on this project together, I could still learn from it and, more importantly, learn from myself. One day while I was at the cafe, I had a group of customers come over who became regulars. They already knew my work and were excited to try the new recipes I had created. The smile on their faces when they tasted what I made filled me with indescribable joy. What was once a fear of failure now turned into a sense of accomplishment. I was doing something I loved, and that was what really mattered. Through this, I discovered that success is not just measured in numbers or recognition, but in the connections we make and the passion we put into our work. I learned to value not only the results, but also the process. Each day at the cafe became a new opportunity to grow and express myself. The journey was still far from easy, but now I saw it as an adventure, full of learning and self-discovery. And so, with that new vision, I knew I was on the right path, even if the steps were still small. Time passed, and each day brought me a new opportunity to grow and learn. The cafe kitchen became a refuge, a place where I could experiment and express myself. There was something magical about seeing ingredients transform into dishes that warmed people's hearts. However, the journey was still full of obstacles. I needed to remember that fear was just part of the process. One morning, while preparing breakfast, I realized that the pancake recipe I always made was different. For some reason, it didn't turn out as I expected. The texture was wrong and the flavor was far from what I wanted. I felt frustrated, and for a moment I thought about giving up. But then I remembered Sarah's words. Every step counts. Instead of letting it get me down, I took a deep breath and decided that this failure was a learning opportunity. Come on, I muttered to myself as I picked up the ingredients again. The smell of sugar and flour enveloped me, and I began to experiment. I adjusted the proportions, added a pinch of cinnamon, and, in the end, I managed to create a better recipe than the previous one. When I served the pancakes to the first customers of the day, their satisfied smiles reminded me that failures are just stepping stones towards success. With each client who praised my work, I felt a wave of confidence grow within me. One afternoon, while cleaning the tables, I saw an old customer, Donna Clara, sitting alone at a table. She always came to the cafe, but that day, she seemed pensive. I approached and asked, "Donna Clara, is everything okay?" She smiled shyly and replied, honey, I'm just remembering my younger days." Sometimes life surprises us, doesn't it? The conversation flowed naturally. She shared stories of her own struggles and achievements. I was touched to realize that even in her challenges, she had found joy and learning. "You know, Donna Clara, sometimes I feel like I'm swimming against the current," I confessed. She laughed softly and said, "The current can teach us to be stronger. Don't be afraid to let yourself go." These interactions became a source of inspiration for me. I realized that, just like Donna Clara, everyone has their battles. It helped me accept my own limitations. It didn't have to be perfect. I just needed to be true to myself and my work. Every day, I allowed myself to be more authentic, and this began to be reflected in the dishes I served and the relationships I built. The cafe began to attract a diverse audience. A group of young artists began to gather there, and their creative conversations fascinated me. One day, one of them, Lucas, approached and said, "Have you ever thought about holding an art night here? You could exhibit work and, who knows, bring the community together." The idea ignited a new passion in me. I wasn't just a cook. I could be an experience facilitator. With the support of Sarah and the artists, I organized the cafe's first art night. My fears began to dissipate when I saw the community coming together, enjoying not only the food, but also the art and music. The cafe was transforming into a space for connection and creativity. That night, I realized that true success wasn't just in sales, but in the experiences we created together. As the cafe grew, I also grew as a person. I began to reflect on the lessons I learned. With each challenge I faced, I saw a new side of myself revealing itself. I learned to value not only the moments of joy, but also the difficulties. They shaped me and made me stronger. Life was full of nuances, and I was learning to navigate them. One evening, after a particularly tiring day, I sat down with Sarah for tea. "You know, Emily, you're becoming a leader here. People look at you with admiration," she said. I smiled, but the insecurity still accompanied me. But what if I fail? What if I can't keep it all up? I asked, anxiety returning to me. Sarah looked at me firmly. "You've failed before. And look at where you are now. Every time you get up, you're creating a new foundation for what's to come. Don't be afraid to fail, because that's how you grow." His words resonated with me, like a reminder that every failure was an opportunity to start over. That night, as I looked out the window of the cafe, I saw the city lights twinkling. I felt a new sense of gratitude. The fear was still there, but now I saw it as a friend who reminded me that the journey was an adventure. Every step I took brought me closer to who I truly wanted to be. The cafe's kitchen was not just a workplace. It was a space where I found myself and where the magic of growth happened. I had a lot to learn, but with each day that passed, I was more confident. And finally, I realized that the true richness was in the connections I made, the stories I shared, and the passion I put into everything I did. Life was more than material achievements. It was about finding meaning in the little things, and I was just starting to figure it all out. The night of the first art exhibition at the cafe had arrived. The space was decorated with vibrant paintings, and the normally simple tables were adorned with fresh flowers. I was excited, but at the same time, anxiety was building up inside me like a storm about to break out. The cafe was full of people, soft music was playing in the background, and the smell of fresh coffee wafted through the air, but the pressure of responsibility was crushing my chest. As guests arrived, I noticed the looks of awe on their faces as they viewed the works of art. However, the little critical voice inside me whispered, "What if they don't like the food? What if this is all a big mistake?" My thoughts were in a whirlwind. Deep down, I knew this was an incredible opportunity, but the fear of failure kept me on the brink of collapse. When the first table started placing orders, my heart skipped a beat. I was about to serve a new dish I had created, a bold combination of flavors that for some reason made me nervous. As I prepared the portions, I remembered the frustration of the pancakes that didn't turn out as I expected. Doubt began to creep in again. What if I screw up again? Surrounded by artists and visitors, I realized everyone was there to celebrate creativity, not just the food. But even so, the pressure to please consumed me. I remembered Dona Clara's words about the current of life. I took a deep breath and tried to focus on what I was doing. I went to the kitchen and, as I stirred the ingredients, I visualized the stories that each dish told. When I finally served the first round of dishes, silence took over the room. Everyone was tasting it, and my stomach was turning. A group of young artists, including Lucas, looked at me expectantly. Time seemed to drag by, and when the first smile appeared, a wave of relief ran through my body. But suddenly the door of the cafe opened with a bang. A group of art critics, known for being demanding, entered, and the atmosphere changed. They went directly to a nearby table where they began to comment on the works on display. I felt my heart sink. They're going to criticize the food too, I thought, and the idea made me even more nervous. The tension in the air was palpable. What was expected of me now? What if they didn't like it? One of the critics, a woman with gray hair and a penetrating gaze, ordered a dish. After all, she wasn't just a critic. She was a respected figure in the city's food scene. Sweat poured down my forehead as I ran to the kitchen. As I prepared the dish, I began to remember all the lessons I had learned over the months. Every mistake, every honest conversation, every moment of vulnerability has brought me here. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. When I placed the plate on her table, my heart was in my mouth. The critic looked at the dish, then at me, and made a gesture of approval. The mood in the room began to change. People began to talk excitedly about the food and the art. I couldn't believe what was happening. The fear that had consumed me now seemed like a distant shadow. However, the tension was still present. The group of critics began to discuss the artworks heatedly. I, on the other hand, was in an internal conflict. They might love the food, but what if the art wasn't well received? What would happen if the night wasn't a success? Insecurity threatened to bring me down again. But then, as I looked at Lucas and the group of performers, I realized how invested they were in the night. They were like family, and I had created a safe space for all of us. I remembered Sarah, Donna Clara, and all the people who had supported my journey. If I didn't believe in myself now, what would I be doing here? Courage began to infiltrate my heart. I approached the table where the critics were sitting and, with a nervous smile, asked, "What did you think of the food?" The gray-haired woman looked at me, and instead of discouraging, she smiled. "The food is delicious, but what really shines here is the passion you put into it all." Her words were like a balm for my soul. I realized that success wasn't just about pleasing everyone, but about being true to who I was. The night continued, and more compliments came not only for the food, but also for the art and the environment we had created together. When the event finally came to an end and the lights began to go out, I was exhausted, but full of new energy. The fear was still there, but now it was no longer an obstacle. He was a friend who reminded me that I was capable of facing any challenge. Looking around, I saw the connections I had made, the laughs shared, and the stories told. That night, I not only overcame my fears, but I also learned that true wealth was in the relationships I built. I understood that life is made up of ups and downs, and that every moment, every failure, and every success shapes who we are. I was ready to embrace this journey, with all its nuances, and finally, I realized that the real magic was in being true to myself. As the last table said goodbye, a feeling of gratitude invaded my being. The cafe was in a state of joyful excitement, with laughter and conversation ringing through the air as guests shared their impressions of the evening. As I looked at the happy faces, I realized that my anxiety had lifted, like fog at dawn. Every pleased look, every compliment received, reminded me that this event was more than just an opportunity to showcase my work. It was a celebration of creativity and human connection. When the last guests left, Lucas and I started to tidy up the space. He gave me a knowing look and said, "You made this happen. You have truly overcome your limitations." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. He was right. I had faced my fears, and in doing so, I discovered a new side of myself. A part of me still feared mistakes, but now I understood that each failure was a lesson, an opportunity to start over. As we cleaned the tables, we talked about the future. Lucas shared his plans to hold more exhibitions and invited me to be part of them. "You brought something special to tonight," he said. "The food, the art, everything came together. We need to do this again." The idea of working together excited me. It was as if a new friendship was forming, a friendship that was based on mutual support and a passion for creating. After everything was sorted, I decided it was time to reflect. I sat at one of the tables, surveying the space that had vibrated with life a few hours earlier. The soft music still resonated in my mind, and the feeling of accomplishment enveloped me. I remembered Donna Clara and her words about the current of life. I had sailed through this current, and instead of sinking, I found new strength. This experience not only helped me overcome fear, but it also made me realize that true success was not measured by applause or criticism, but by the connections we formed. The next day, I woke up with a new perspective. The sun was shining through the windows, and I felt renewed energy. I looked at the kitchen, which now seemed like a space full of possibilities. I believed that every dish I create would tell a story. These weren't just recipes, they were reflections of who I am and what I learned. I went to the local market and talked to the vendors about fresh ingredients. My heart was filled with joy to see their enthusiasm in sharing their products. Creating relationships with them was as important as making good food. The connection I had felt the night of the exhibition extended to every aspect of my life. I talked to Sarah on the phone, and she congratulated me on the night. "You always had this talent, but now you believe in yourself," she said. Your words touched me. It was true. I was starting to accept who I am, and that made all the difference. As the days went by, my cafe turned into a meeting place for artists and food lovers. Exhibition nights became regular, and each event brought new people, new stories, and new friendships. What was once a coffee-only space now pulsed with the energy of creativity and collaboration. Critics who had been to the first exhibition started coming back, not just for the food, but for the atmosphere we created. The gray-haired woman who had complimented me became a frequent customer. One day, as we were talking, she told me about her own journey. It was comforting to hear that even the most demanding critics faced insecurities. It made me realize that we all, in some way, struggle with our fears. The change in me was clear. Not only did I learn to cook delicious dishes, but I also learned to value the beauty of human connections. Every interaction, every smile exchanged, reminded me that life is made up of moments. And those moments, as simple as they were what really mattered. The cafe became a place where people felt welcomed, where art and food intertwined, creating a unique experience. I knew that every past mistake now served as a stepping stone to success. It wasn't just about winning, it was about growing and learning. As life went on, I realized that true richness was in the relationships we cultivated and the stories we shared. Every dish I served was a new chance to connect with someone, to offer a piece of myself. And through each interaction, I continued to discover myself. That first night of the exhibition was not just an event, it was a milestone in my life. She taught me that even when I fail, there will always be a new opportunity. And, most importantly, the courage to be vulnerable is what truly makes us human. I'm ready to face whatever comes, with the certainty that, regardless of the difficulties, there will always be new stories to tell and new dishes to create. Looking back, I realize how my life has changed since that first night of exposure. The journey I started, full of doubts and fears, turned into a story of overcoming and self-discovery. Every dish I prepared, every conversation I had, helped me understand that I was capable of so much more than I ever imagined. The limitations that once paralyzed me now seemed like just challenges to overcome, and I became a stronger person because of it. The cafe became a true sanctuary of creativity, where I and other artists could express ourselves freely. The exhibition nights multiplied, and each event brought new voices and new stories. As I saw people connecting, sharing laughter, and exchanging ideas, I realized I was creating a space where vulnerability was celebrated. It taught me that by opening my heart, I was not only allowing others in, but also allowing myself to be more authentic. One of the most important lessons I learned on this journey was about failures and starting over. Every mistake I made in the kitchen became a learning opportunity. I remember a time when a dish didn't turn out as I expected. Instead of letting it get me down, I invited customers to give their opinions, and together we found a way to improve the recipe. This experience taught me that collaboration is a powerful form of growth. The fear of failure has been replaced by a desire to explore and innovate. Now, when I face a challenge, I see it as a chance to learn something new. Over time, I realized that true success wasn't in the perfect recipes or winning awards, but in the connections I built along the way. The richness I was really seeking was the richness of experiences and relationships. The cafe became a meeting point not just for food lovers, but for people looking for a welcoming space where they could be themselves. The friendships that emerged in this environment showed me the value of community and empathy. Each person who entered my cafe brought with them a unique story, and each conversation brought us closer. The friendship with Lucas was one of the most impactful. He was not just a coworker, but a true partner on the journey. Together, we explored new ideas, experimented with flavors, and created an environment that encouraged creativity. With your support, I learned to see the potential in every mistake. Lucas always reminded me that failures were part of the process, and this helped me face my fears more courageously. This friendship transformed me, and I became more open and willing to accept life's imperfections. Reflecting on all of this, I realized that the wisdom acquired throughout this journey has allowed me to see the world with different eyes. I learned to value small moments, the beauty of everyday life, and the importance of being grateful for each experience. The difficulties have not disappeared, but now I look at them with a new perspective. Life is a dance of ups and downs, and every step, even the clumsy ones, is part of the choreography. Today, my cafe is more than a place to serve meals. It is a space where people feel seen and heard. Every dish I create is an expression of love and an invitation to connection. I also became a more attentive listener. The stories clients share inspire me and teach me about human resilience. Life is full of challenges, but it is also full of beauty and joy. I am at peace with the experiences I have been through. Each of them contributed to the person I am today. The journey wasn't easy, but every tear, every laugh, and every mistake brought me here. Now, I am in harmony with my emotions and the world around me. I believe that we all have the power to transform our lives, and that true change starts from the inside out. With a heart full of gratitude, I move forward. The future is a blank book, and I'm ready to write new stories, explore new flavors, and continue to connect with people in ways I never imagined. After all, life is a continuous journey of learning and growth, and I'm excited to see where this journey takes me next. Looking back, I realize how my life has changed since that first night of exposure. The journey I started, full of doubts and fears, turned into a story of overcoming and self-discovery. Every dish I prepared, every conversation I had, helped me understand that I was capable of so much more than I ever imagined. The limitations that once paralyzed me now seemed like just challenges to overcome, and I became a stronger person because of it. The cafe became a true sanctuary of creativity, where I and other artists could express ourselves freely. The exhibition nights multiplied, and each event brought new voices and new stories. As I saw people connecting, sharing laughter, and exchanging ideas, I realized I was creating a space where vulnerability was celebrated. It taught me that by opening my heart, I was not only allowing others in, but also allowing myself to be more authentic. One of the most important lessons I learned on this journey was about failures and starting over. Every mistake I made in the kitchen became a learning opportunity. I remember a time when a dish didn't turn out as I expected. Instead of letting it get me down, I invited customers to give their opinions, and together we found a way to improve the recipe. This experience taught me that collaboration is a powerful form of growth. The fear of failure has been replaced by a desire to explore and innovate. Now, when I face a challenge, I see it as a chance to learn something new. Over time, I realized that true success wasn't in the perfect recipes or winning awards, but in the connections I built along the way. The richness I was really seeking was the richness of experiences and relationships. The cafe became a meeting point not just for food lovers, but for people looking for a welcoming space where they could be themselves. The friendships that emerged in this environment showed me the value of community and empathy. Each person who entered my cafe brought with them a unique story, and each conversation brought us closer. The friendship with Lucas was one of the most impactful. He was not just a coworker, but a true partner on the journey. Together, we explored new ideas, experimented with flavors, and created an environment that encouraged creativity. With your support, I learned to see the potential in every mistake. Lucas always reminded me that failures were part of the process, and this helped me face my fears more courageously. This friendship transformed me, and I became more open and willing to accept life's imperfections. Reflecting on all of this, I realized that the wisdom acquired throughout this journey has allowed me to see the world with different eyes. I learned to value small moments, the beauty of everyday life, and the importance of being grateful for each experience. The difficulties have not disappeared, but now I look at them with a new perspective. Life is a dance of ups and downs, and every step, even the clumsy ones, is part of the choreography. Today, my cafe is more than a place to serve meals. It is a space where people feel seen and heard. Every dish I create is an expression of love and an invitation to connection. I also became a more attentive listener. The stories clients share inspire me and teach me about human resilience. Life is full of challenges, but it is also full of beauty and joy. I am at peace with the experiences I have been through. Each of them contributed to the person I am today. The journey wasn't easy, but every tear, every laugh, and every mistake brought me here. Now I am in harmony with my emotions and the world around me. I believe that we all have the power to transform our lives, and that true change starts from the inside out. With a heart full of gratitude, I move forward. The future is a blank book, and I'm ready to write new stories, explore new flavors, and continue to connect with people in ways I never imagined. After all, life is a continuous journey of learning and growth, and I'm excited to see where this journey takes me next. And when I look at what I left behind, I can see that every mistake I made was not a burden, but a step on the ladder of my evolution. Each misstep taught me to walk more steadily, listen more closely, and love more deeply. Ultimately, the true richness I found was not just in the recipes I developed or the exhibits I organized, but in the stories I shared and the lives I touched. So, I ask myself, what about you? What are your overcoming stories? What lessons have you learned on your journey? I invite you to reflect on this and share your experiences in the comments. Let's together create a space for exchange and learning where every voice matters and every story is valuable. Don't hesitate to like and subscribe to the channel, as your interactions help bring more inspiring content like this. The future awaits us, and together we can make it an even more beautiful place. Let's move forward, because life is a dance and we still have many steps to take.